I stood there frozen on the stone steps, watching my mother-in-law fling my suitcase through the air like it was garbage. It bounced once, then again, before it burst open in the middle of the driveway. A few thrift store blouses scattered across the concrete like torn paper, and Miranda, yes, Miranda Ellington, the queen of the Ellington fortune, smirked with the kind of pride that only comes from believing you've finally gotten the last word. Standing next to her, my husband Declan, well, ex-husband technically, though not yet officially, laughed as he held up his phone to record the moment. His sister Daphne clapped like a seal at a circus, delighted with the drama. They didn't know the suitcase was a setup. They didn't know that every meaningful thing I ever owned, my real clothes, my laptop, my legal documents, and the intellectual property rights to Declan's so-called genius software, was already safe in a storage unit miles away. They didn't know that what they had just thrown down the stairs wasn't my loss. It was their warning. Let me rewind. My name is Janelle Avery. 5 years ago, I was living a comfortable, quiet life in Oakland. I was 28, a senior software engineer at a mid-sized cybersecurity firm. I wasn't rich, but I was free. Had my own place, my own car, and the kind of peaceful morning routines that only single women with good health insurance can afford. I wasn't looking for anyone, especially not someone like Declan Ellington. We met at a fintech conference in San Francisco. I was giving a talk on machine learning applications for fraud detection. He was on a panel about digital time optimization, or at least that's what his bio said. I don't even remember what he said on stage that day, just that he had that sort of effortless charm, the kind that made people lean in just a little too far. He found me afterward, said he loved my talk, said he'd been thinking about scheduling software, but with AI baked in. At the time, I thought it was cute. I thought it was bold. I thought maybe, just maybe, this arrogant, gorgeous man with the sculpted cheekbones and old money haircut was more than just a pretty face. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. But back then he sent flowers to my office, white tulips. He took me out to Michelin star restaurants, but always claimed it was just because. He remembered small details like how I only drink oat milk or how I hum softly when I'm concentrating. We dated for 8 months before he proposed at Lake Tahoe. The ring was stunning. His mother's, he said. Miranda's. That should have been my first clue. We married at the Ellington Estate, some massive piece of historic architecture perched in Marin County, the kind of place with marble fountains, iron gates, and its own ballroom. Declan wanted to invite 500 people. I wanted 30. We compromised at 487. I remember that number. I remember sitting beside him at the long gold banquet table, smiling until my cheeks hurt while Miranda made passive-aggressive speeches about old money and real women who knew their place. My parents sat in the back near the exit. Declan's side wore custom suits and sipped from vintage crystal, while my side politely avoided the wine and smiled through their discomfort. But I was in love, or at least I thought I was. The first cracks appeared 3 months in. Declan stopped opening doors for me, started staying late at the office without notice. He became distant, like a man who had gotten the prize and was now on to the next challenge. Then came the idea. He called it Timefold, a supposedly revolutionary AI scheduling system for enterprise use. The way he described it, you'd think it would change the entire way businesses organize their time. But the truth, it was half-baked, messy, a dream without a blueprint. Guess who he asked to help? It's just a few bugs, he'd say, sliding his MacBook across the bed. 2 seconds, babe. Just give it a quick look. I gave it more than a quick look. I rewrote his logic models. I optimized his API calls. I cleaned up the database architecture and built custom modules for syncing and redundancy. He'd thank me with a kiss on the forehead and go back to his gaming console while I finished refactoring the entire codebase. Meanwhile, Miranda had taken a liking to calling me at 6:45 in the morning to ask a favor. That favor could be anything from organizing her wine cellar to making guest lists for her charity events. Declan encouraged it. She just wants to bond, he said once. Bond? I asked. Or break me? He laughed. I didn't. And Daphne. Don't even get me started. She'd drop by unannounced, insult my clothes, judge my bookshelves, and always leave her dog's mess in the backyard for me to clean up. But what really gutted me, what started the fire inside, was how they talked about my work. One evening, I came home exhausted after fixing a client-side security breach at my job. Declan handed me a glass of wine and said, "You must love that little gig of yours." "Little gig? Come on," he shrugged. "We'll be billionaires soon. You won't have to work at all." And he said it like it was a gift. Then came the night everything changed. Declan was in the shower. His phone buzzed 3 times. Then again. Then again. I wasn't snooping, but his screen lit up with a text from Daphne. The preview said, "She still thinks you're going to give her credit." I froze. My hand hovered over the phone, heart pounding. I opened the thread. What I read nearly made me drop the phone. Daphne. "Dad always said, don't let the girl think she owns the gold mine. Use her, then move on." Declan. "Don't worry, I'm gonna let her think she's in the inner circle. Then once it's launched, she's out. All the IP will be in my name." Miranda chimed in too. "Do not make the mistake your uncle made. Never put her name on anything. I've already connected you with a lawyer who'll make sure it's airtight." Daphne replied with, "She's useful now, but later, we'll find you someone better. Someone that looks like an Ellington." My ears started ringing. I sat on the edge of the bed as dozens of messages unfolded in front of me. Conversations about investor meetings I knew nothing about. Jokes about me being their free labor. Emails I had written, repackaged as his own pitch decks. They were building an empire, on my work, and planning to erase me from history. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I smiled. When Declan walked out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, humming, I smiled up at him and asked if he wanted tea. I brought it to him in his favorite mug and kissed him on the cheek. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, while he dreamed beside me. My mind was racing, not with fear, but with plans. If they wanted to play games, then I would play chess. And trust me, I'd been studying the board my entire life. The morning after I read those messages, I got out of bed before Declan. I made him breakfast like everything was normal. Eggs over medium with a dash of hot sauce, just the way he liked. He didn't notice the stillness in my voice, or how I looked at him like he was already gone. He kissed my cheek and said, "Big week coming up. We're almost there." Then he walked out the door wearing the suit I had ironed, carrying the smile of a man who thought he had everything under control. At 11:42 a.m. during my lunch break, I stepped into an office tower downtown. The elevator doors opened on the 22nd floor, and the receptionist at Washington and Fellows greeted me with a calm smile. I had already sent over everything in advance. The designs, the screenshots, the messages, the commits, the proof. She simply asked me to wait. A few minutes later, I was ushered into an office with tall windows and dark walnut bookshelves. Cassandra Washington stood to greet me. She wore slate gray heels, no jewelry, and had the kind of energy that made you sit straighter without realizing it. She didn't waste time. "Do you have proof you authored the code?" she asked, folding her hands. I opened my laptop and showed her everything. Every line of logic, every architecture diagram, every commit pushed from my personal Git account, digitally signed and timestamped. I showed her voice memos, Slack threads, and screenshots of Declan asking for technical help with vague phrases like, "Can you just make it work?" She studied each file like a surgeon preparing for a high-risk operation. Then she leaned back in her chair, nodded, and said, "This is strong. You're not just involved. You're the creator. He's built his castle on your foundation." I asked her what my options were. She smiled slightly, not kindly but confidently. "We don't fight for scraps. We take the whole plate." That afternoon, Cassandra and I began building the structure that would save everything I had created. We registered a new company in my name, Avery Core Systems, LLC. We filed it in Santa Clara County to avoid detection. Every line of code that had been used in Declan's demo was registered under my company's intellectual property, backed with digital forensics. I took the latest working version of the app, the real one, and uploaded it to a secure private server, separate from anything Declan could touch. The version he had, it looked good. It had bells and whistles. But I had quietly stripped it of the critical modules it needed to function under pressure. It would pass a shallow demo, but it couldn't scale, and it never would. That was intentional. For the next 2 months, I lived a double life. To Declan, I was still the supportive wife. I helped him polish his investor slide deck. I made small talk with Miranda over lunch. I nodded politely when Daphne told me that my hair looked less frizzy than usual. I smiled when Declan called my work cute, and when Miranda said, "Women in tech are such a novelty." At night, while Declan played his video games and ignored me, I refined my architecture, optimized my algorithms, and built something they would never see coming. One morning, Declan left a folder on the kitchen counter. It had those colored tabs attached to pages that needed signatures. "Just routine stuff," he said. "It's all for the company. Legal protections, assets, nothing serious." I nodded and told him I'd read through it after work. What he didn't know was that I had already sent those documents to Cassandra the night before. What he also didn't know was that she had inserted one clause, buried on page 48, right above his signature block. It read, "Any intellectual property developed independently by either party during the course of the marriage shall remain the sole and protected property of its creator, provided that creation can be verified through digital or documented evidence." Declan signed the documents without a second glance. Miranda notarized them in her home office like she was officiating a coronation. They thought they were getting ahead of me. They didn't realize they had just signed away every legal claim they could ever make on what I had built. From that day on, everything I did was deliberate. I began collecting the last of my personal items from the house. Not all at once, but slowly. I moved my grandmother's jewelry, the backup hard drives, my personal journal, and every item with sentimental value to a storage unit across town registered under my LLC. I replaced most of the clothes in my closet with cheap thrift store outfits. I emptied the safe of everything but the documents Miranda had insisted on keeping for protection. She didn't notice I had switched them for copies. I even replaced the designer heels I loved with discount lookalikes. Because I knew Miranda. I knew Daphne. They would not go quietly. And when the time came, I wanted them to think they had humiliated me. I wanted them to throw the suitcase. I wanted them to believe they had won. All the while, Declan was planning the big investor demo. He rehearsed in the mirror every night, pitching Timefold like it was going to be the next Google. He had no idea he was rehearsing my words, using my slides, presenting my code. Well, the broken version of it. I helped him refine the pitch, suggested small adjustments, made sure the visuals looked sleek, and all the while kept the real product locked behind digital walls he couldn't access. His meeting with Crestone Ventures was scheduled for March 22nd. Miranda was already planning a launch gala. Daphne had even posted a teaser. Next week, we changed the game. They had no idea they were the ones about to be played. Exactly 1 week before the meeting, I filed for divorce in Santa Clara County. Cassandra handled everything. The papers would be served the day after the pitch. Declan would get to bask in his fake success for one last moment. I wanted him to feel untouchable right before the floor collapsed beneath him. The morning of the pitch, Declan stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. He looked at me through the reflection. "Today's the day," he said. "After this, we're unstoppable." I kissed him on the cheek, handed him his tablet, and said, "You've got this." I watched him walk out the front door with a calm I didn't recognize in myself. Not anger, not fear, something colder, sharper, like steel that had been tempered by fire. 15 minutes later, I left too. But I didn't go to work. I went to the same building where the investor meeting was being held. I took the elevator to the 24th floor and met Cassandra and two Crestone representatives in a private conference room with a view of the entire bay. I placed my laptop on the glass table and opened a live version of PulseTrack. It loaded instantly. The dashboard gleamed. I showed them the user flow, the AI integration, the load balancing metrics. Cassandra handed them a folder containing my patent filings, digital signatures, documentation of code commits, in a full ownership chain linked to Avery Core Systems. The head investor, Ava Chen, was silent for a moment. Then she said, "He told us he built this from scratch." I didn't flinch. "He didn't even know what he was asking me to build," I replied. She smiled slowly. "Would you be available this afternoon to present the real product?" I nodded once. "Yes, but first you might want to go downstairs." Downstairs in a high-rise conference room filled with venture capitalists, Declan Ellington was about to launch a demo built on half of a dream and none of the truth. And I was already waiting in the wings, ready to show the world what I had really built, what I had always built. Not for him, not for them, but for me. And it was time. The elevator doors opened to the 21st floor with a soft chime. I stepped out into a lobby that buzzed with quiet energy, voices murmuring behind frosted glass, the smell of designer cologne and fresh brewed espresso floating in the air. I walked past reception unnoticed, just another woman in a navy blazer with a laptop bag and a mission. The hallway to the conference room was lined with black and white portraits of founders and funding rounds, plaques of exits, stories carved in gold. Behind the thick glass doors, Declan stood at the head of a long conference table, 10 investors in sleek chairs watching him. His hair was slicked back, his custom suit impeccable. His voice was polished, smooth, like it had been rehearsed 100 times. And it had. I had watched him pace our living room for weeks, practicing lines I had written, phrases I had invented. With Timefold, he was saying, we've redefined what intelligent scheduling looks like. It's not just about saving time, it's about reclaiming potential. The head of the table, Ava Chen, sat still with her hands folded under her chin. Her eyes were unreadable. The other investors glanced at the pitch deck projected behind Declan, nodding in polite rhythm. I quietly entered and sat in the back of the room. No one noticed me. Not yet. Declan moved to the next slide and clicked the remote. This is the core of our system, he said, his voice rising slightly. The AI-driven scheduling engine. Built from the ground up by our in-house team. I tilted my head. In-house team. He clicked again to launch the live demo. The screen froze. There was a short silence. Then the spinning circle appeared in the corner of the projection. Loading, still loading. Declan chuckled lightly, the kind of nervous laugh meant to put people at ease. Happens sometimes. Wi-Fi in these buildings, right? He clicked again. Nothing. The screen stuttered, flickered, then threw a red error message. Server timeout, retry request. Someone shifted in their chair. A man at the far end of the table frowned and reached for his tablet. Declan tried to cover it with another joke, but the room wasn't laughing. He unplugged the laptop, plugged it back in, restarted the app. The demo failed again, and again. Ava finally spoke. Did you test this version before the meeting? Declan straightened his jacket and cleared his throat. Of course, we ran simulations. There must be a configuration issue or... You said your engine was production ready. It is. It's just... Maybe there's a version mismatch. Someone near the end of the table muttered, he doesn't know what's wrong. I stood up, every head turned. Declan's eyes locked on mine, and in that instant, the color drained from his face like water from a cracked glass. Janelle, he said, what are you doing here? I walked to the front of the room slowly, calmly, like I had done it 100 times in my mind. My heels echoed against the polished floor. I set my laptop on the table and looked directly at Ava. I'm here to show you the real version of this product. Ava leaned back in her chair, intrigued. And who exactly are you? I'm Janelle Avery, I said, Declan's wife, and the software engineer who wrote every single line of code for the system you were supposed to see today. Gas fluttered across the table. Declan stammered something about partnership, about teamwork, about marital collaboration. I ignored him. I connected my laptop to the projector and launched the pulse track interface. The room lit up with a dashboard that was clean, intuitive, and alive. In under 3 seconds, the AI engine loaded and began auto-scheduling test calendars across 10 simulated users. Smooth, real, flawless. I turned to the investors. This is the actual product, built by me, owned by me, filed under my company, Avery Core Systems. Declan stepped forward, a sheen of sweat breaking across his forehead. Wait, we built this together. She helped, sure, but the vision, the concept, it's mine. I didn't look at him. Instead, I pulled up a folder on the screen. These are the design files, all time-stamped, authored from my personal systems. These are my Git commit logs, my version control history, every fix, every algorithm, every deployment. documented and signed. Then I clicked into a secure folder and opened the scanned legal agreement Declan had signed, the one with the clause on page 48. I zoomed in slowly and highlighted the sentence. This document, signed by Mr. Ellington, states clearly that any intellectual property developed independently remains the sole property of its creator. I handed Ava a printed copy. Her eyes scanned the text. She looked up at Declan. "Is this your signature?" Declan opened his mouth, then closed it, then nodded. "Yes, but," she cut him off. "And you didn't develop this software. You don't understand the code, do you?" "I helped shape the vision," he said weakly. "I gave her the idea." I turned toward him, my voice level but deadly quiet. "You gave me the idea?" "Declan, you thought an API was an airline." A few of the investors snorted involuntarily. I continued. "Declan never wrote a single function. He doesn't know how the system handles concurrency or how the AI resolves cross-time zone scheduling conflicts. He can't explain the neural prediction layer because he doesn't know it exists." I clicked on the demo again. It recalibrated instantly. "This version," I said, "has already been stress-tested with simulated enterprise users. It can handle 300 concurrent data inputs with less than 0.3 seconds of latency. It is secure, scalable, and investor-ready. And it's mine." The silence was different now, not tense, respectful. Ava looked at her colleagues, then back at me. "Miss Avery, would you be available to meet this afternoon? We'd like to discuss moving forward with you." I nodded. "I'll be available at 3, right here." She smiled and gathered her materials. Declan tried one last time. His voice cracked. "Janelle, please. We can still fix this." I looked him straight in the eyes. "You spent months trying to erase me, to steal what I built. Now you can sit and watch as I rebuild it without you." The investors filed out one by one. Ava was last. As she passed me, she whispered, "Brilliant move. See you at 3. Then it was just me and Declan in the room. He didn't say anything, just stood there, arms limp at his sides, watching the empire he thought was his melt into air. I packed my laptop, walked out slowly. On my way down in the elevator, I checked my phone. A message from Cassandra had just come in. "Investor term sheet ready, $15 million offer, 30% equity, optional second round in 6 months. All clean, let's win." I smiled to myself and texted back, "Approved. Tell them we're building something real this time." And that's how I left the building. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's footnote, but as the founder of the very thing they tried to steal. And this time, I wasn't giving anyone the chance to take it again. 2 weeks after the investor meeting, the divorce papers were officially served. I made sure the process server delivered them on a Monday morning, just after Declan had returned from what should have been a celebratory weekend. Except there was nothing to celebrate. His investor meetings had all been canceled. His name had been quietly removed from Creststone's internal briefings. No one returned his emails. When the documents landed in his hands, I knew he would do what men like Declan always do: deny, deflect, then beg. He tried calling me 5 times that day, left voice messages that started with anger and ended with desperation. I didn't answer any of them. By Wednesday, Miranda was the one calling. She tried to sound diplomatic, her tone pretending to be above the fray. She said things like, "Let's be reasonable, and we don't need to drag the family name through this. And surely there's a solution that benefits everyone." She was right. There was a solution. It just didn't benefit them. Cassandra responded to their legal team with a copy of the prenup addendum Declan had signed, the patent documents filed under Avery Core Systems, and a financial breakdown showing that I was entitled to half of the marital assets. There wasn't much left to divide. Most of their investments had been leveraged against the now worthless Timefold. Their lawyer tried to fight it anyway. He filed a motion claiming I had stolen intellectual property, that I had sabotaged Declan's product. But every timestamp, every line of code, every server log pointed to me as the original author. The judge dismissed their claim with prejudice and ordered Declan to pay my legal fees. The humiliation spread quickly in their circle. A few society blogs picked it up under blind item columns. Prominent tech heir loses control of startup to soon-to-be ex-wife in a stunning legal blow. But that wasn't the end. There was one last item left unresolved, my grandmother's ring. The emerald one Miranda had taken into the family vault when I married Declan. I had asked for it back politely during the divorce proceedings. Miranda ignored every request, claimed she didn't know what I was talking about, said maybe it was misplaced. So I took it to court, and the judge issued a direct order. Miranda Ellington was to surrender the ring within 7 days. That's how I found myself pulling up to the Ellington estate one final time. It was early afternoon. The sky was cloudless. The marble steps gleamed under the California sun. I parked my new car at the base of the drive, a Tesla Model S, graphite gray, purchased with the first installment of my Crestone funding. As I stepped out, the front door opened. Miranda stood at the top of the steps. Daphne flanked her, phone already in hand, recording. And Declan was there too, standing just inside the threshold with a drink in his hand, smiling like the devil thought he still had cards to play. Miranda held the same thrift store suitcase I had packed weeks earlier. She lifted it above her head, and with one final sneer, she hurled it down the steps. It bounced 3 times before bursting open at my feet. Blouses and old flats scattered across the stone like debris from a wreck. Daphne laughed from behind the camera. Declan raised his glass in mock salute. "That's all you were ever worth," Miranda said loudly. "Rags, trash. And that little stunt you pulled? It won't last." I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my blazer pocket, took out my phone, and opened my banking app. I turned the screen toward them. $15 million. Liquid. Cleared. Untouchable. Their laughter stopped. Declan's smile froze. Miranda's face lost its color. I slowly climbed the steps. My heels clicked with precision. Every step felt heavier with meaning than the last. When I reached the top, I stood in front of them, eyes locked. "Your son didn't build anything," I said. "He pitched my vision. He ran on my code. He tried to cash in on something he didn't understand. And when that didn't work, you threw a suitcase down the stairs like it was the end of the story. But that wasn't a suitcase. That was a signal, a message, a test." I paused and looked Miranda dead in the eyes. "You failed." She tried to speak, but no sound came. I took a folded document from my bag and handed it to her. It was a deed assignment. 8 months ago, Miranda had mortgaged the estate to help fund Declan's pitch. She had expected to repay the loan with investor capital once Timefold launched. It never launched. And 3 months of missed payments later, the bank sold that mortgage debt. To me, I smiled gently. "You're 90 days behind. The foreclosure process starts tomorrow. But don't worry, I bought the debt. The house is mine now. You have 30 days to vacate." Miranda sat down hard on the bench beside the front door. Her hands trembled. Daphne looked at Declan and began to whisper something, but the panic on her face said more than words ever could. Declan stepped forward, still holding his drink like it might protect him. "Janelle," he said, his voice strained, "we don't have to do this. We can fix it. We were good once. Don't you remember?" I tilted my head. "I remember." I looked at the spot near the door where I once stood waiting for a dinner party, not allowed to enter until Miranda gave me permission. I looked at the staircase where I carried centerpieces for her luncheons. I looked at the foyer where Daphne once called me Charity in Heels. And I remembered everything. "You had a woman who would have built empires with you," I said. "You could have stood beside me, but you chose to stand on me instead." I turned and walked past them, straight through the house, through the halls I used to tread carefully. I entered the family vault, retrieved my grandmother's ring, slipped it on my finger, and left without a single backward glance. That night I signed the final closing documents on the estate. The Ellington residence was officially transferred to Avery Core Properties. I had no intention of living there. Instead, I hired architects. I gutted the dining hall and turned it into an innovation lab. The ballroom became a conference space, the wine cellar became a server room, and where the Ellington family crest once hung above the fireplace, I installed a new emblem. A minimalist A carved into titanium. Avery Core Global Headquarters. Within 6 months, our user base passed 50,000. Within 9 months, PulseTrack was acquired in a partial buyout, valuing the company at over $100 million. I kept majority ownership, and I made a point of hiring an all-female development team every one of them with a story of being overlooked, dismissed, or undermined. We created mentorship programs, childcare allowances, paid family leave that didn't require begging. Every room in that mansion was redesigned to serve progress, not privilege. 6 months later, Declan applied for a job at one of my competitors. He listed me as his reference, assuming I would stay silent. They called me. I answered. I told them the truth. Declan Ellington does not understand the fundamentals of software architecture. He takes credit for the work of others, and he cannot be trusted with ownership, access, or strategy. He now works at a call center. Miranda sold her firm to cover legal fees. Daphne moved to Arizona. The house they once ruled from now belongs to women who build. And me? I walk those marble floors in flats and jeans, not to prove anything, but because I no longer need to be invited in. They once laughed as they threw out my suitcase, but I held the deed. And in the end, I didn't just walk away. I walked back in and made the house mine. For good.